Hi, welcome to Money Control. Here we are talking about the GDP forecast just a few days before GDP numbers are to come in. India's growth story is expected to keep on track in this fiscal as the economy is set to grow over 6% again. Economists in a money control poll had projected 6.6% growth, that is the median this year. So let's go to our economists for this quarter. Let's go to our economists and see what they say about the GDP growth. What's the outlook ahead? And can India achieve the same growth rate like it did in the previous year? And do it at a point of time when we are facing Trump's tariffs. Moreover, can GST cuts and the income tax cut provide the GDP growth a boost? We have with us Rajani Sinha from Chief Economist, CareEdge, Paras Jasrai, Associate Director, India Ratings and Research, and Anita Rangan, Chief Economist, RBL Bank, to discuss the issue with us. Let me go to you first, Rajni. Uh, what do you make of this quarter? How has the last quarter been, the Q1 FY26, and what are your projections for it, and what is the reason behind that?
Ishan, so for the first quarter, we are expecting some moderation in growth from the very high number above 7% that we had in the fourth quarter of last year. And if we look at the high frequency economic indicators, they are also reflecting that there has been some moderation in Q1. But at the same time, there has been some supporting factors for the economy. Monsoon has been good, rural demand has been good, interest rates have been cut, income tax burden has been lowered in the starting the first quarter of this fiscal year. So yes, there are some positives also. So taking all that into account, we are expecting the first quarter GDP growth at 6.7%.
Let me come back to you on this, Rajni. Now, as I am to understand, the rural economy is doing very well, right? The services sector has kept to its growth mark. But if you look at manufacturing, the IIP and other data, that's not really performed well. Is that all because of Trump's tariffs, or are there other reasons to it as well?
So, Ishan, there's a combination of factors. If I look at the negatives, if I look at the factors that have kind of posed headwinds to growth, one is definitely the trade related uncertainty that you just spoke about because of US reciprocal tariff. There's just a whole lot of uncertainty. We don't know how this game is going to play out. But apart from that, also there are some concerns specifically about around urban consumption. So while rural consumption has been good and it has been further supported by good monsoon, urban consumption is showing signs of moderation. And in fact, we have been studying what's happening to hiring in the urban area and what kind of impact is that having on consumption. And what we find is that overall, if you see the employee cost, so we had done the study of listed companies, some 1300 listed companies, and we looked at the employee cost, and we specifically looked at what is happening to IT sector and employee cost there and what is happening to hiring there. And what we find is that specifically in the IT sector, and please note, IT sector becomes important because if there's a lot of employment generation in the urban area that happens from the IT sector, and that there we are seeing some moderation in employee cost. So in fact, quite a bit of slowdown we have seen there. So employee cost, which was at a peak of 21% or so growth, YOY growth around FY 2021, that has fallen to around 5% growth in last year. So that's the kind of moderation we have seen. Even if we see in terms of hiring, we find that in FY25, the hiring, there was a very, very minuscule growth in hiring. And that was on top of a contraction, 4% contraction seen in hiring in the previous year. And this study we had done for a sample group of IT companies. So what I'm trying to basically say is that urban consumption is appears to have got impacted as household income has got impacted by lower hiring and by lower growth in employee cost. So it's a combination of hiring as well as what's happening to wage growth. So I think apart from this Trump tariff and those concerns, trade related concerns, otherwise also I would say household income has got adversely impacted, and that's also getting reflected somewhat in urban consumption growth.
Paras, before I come to you, let me go to Anita first. Anita, one question to you. On the urban consumption part, is the GST growth, GST cuts likely to help in this regard? I think we've dropped Anita. Paras, let me come to you. Is the GST cut likely to help urban consumption?
Yeah, thanks, Ishan, for having me. So, GST cuts that would have been announced and would be subsequently implemented, possibly, yeah, from October. They would have some boost definitely to the consumption demand, and there is a base effect also in the second half of FY 26, 26 because of low growth last year. So that would also be a like a good boost. But overall, if you ask me, then that uncertainty related to tariffs and the kind of that would have an impact on the overall investment demand as well, because uncertainty is something which affects very has a very uh, um, resounding impact on overall household expectations as well, and also the investment decisions of various firms. So that's why we have also like kept our overall FY 26 GDP forecast intact at 6.3%, and we expect that overall the tariff uncertainty and the related volatility that has been there in the overall global environment, that would have be more impactful for the growth.
Anita, if you can hear me now, I Rajni, coming back to you before we get back to Anita in this part. Uh, on the GST part, how much of a boost can we see from this, given it would be implemented only for half of the year if it comes in from October onwards? Do do we see a dip in the Q2 consumption because of this? Because a lot of discretionary consumption might be shifted to the next quarter, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Um, Ishan, it depends, in what form GST comes. And we may see a little bit of what you are saying, that, consumption being postponed to Q3, Q2 consumption. But the broad picture remains that GST, if, it reduces the number of tax slab as is being proposed, that should provide a substantial boost to consumption. It will come towards the, end of the year. We'll only be able to see probably, in the third and fourth quarter the impact of that. Nevertheless, that would be a supportive factor, and it becomes specifically important because as you see, the global scenario is going to remain uncertain. There are a lot of concerns around what's going to happen to external demand. And if the 50% tariff that the US has proposed, if that stays, then kind of you can assume that the US market is kind of out of reach for India. So in that context, it becomes very important that government does everything possible to boost domestic demand. So in that sense, this step is also one more step in that direction. Already income tax burden was reduced, so this would provide further boost. And in fact, this boost will be all around, because the income tax burden was only for that category, which is paying income tax, which for Indian economy, it's a very, very low percentage of people who are paying income tax. Nevertheless, having said that, that impact also would be meaningful, the income tax reduction. But the GST reduction would definitely give a strong boost to consumption.
Paras, would it be enough to offset the impact of Trump's tariffs, even partially, if we say so? Can GST do that? Today, Fitch announced stable outlook, BBB minus ratings. So BBB minus rating. So, and they did point out to GST having some impact on consumption growth. But is it enough to offset that impact of Trump's tariffs if they stay that high at 50%?
Yeah, that's a very big if, and that's what our concern is as well. That definitely the boost will be there for consumption demand, but it's the trend that we have been seeing, like household income, as Rajni also pointed out, that have been stagnant, and they would definitely get a boost, but that would be mostly in the fourth quarter or maybe the second half of third quarter onwards only, significantly. But a major part of the year would be impacted by the kind of unprecedented uncertainty that the world order has been up for a reset in terms of how the global trade has happened, and we have started to see some impact of that also in our services. If you look at the services exports also going gradually, the pace slowing down as well. So it is also having ramifications in other, services sectors as well. So far, the tariffs have been for goods only, but we are seeing them impact on services as well. So definitely that would have an impact, and investment demand, as I pointed out, will be on a wait and watch mode again, perhaps this year. Some sectors have been showing some increase, definitely renewables and other new age sectors. But if one asks for a broad-based recovery, then definitely, this looks a very big down grading factor for this year in terms of growth, getting a very substantial boost going beyond even like 6.5%. That would be really tough until unless the government does some very significant reforms that many people have been advocating for long time.
Rajni, coming back to you on a few aspects. Now, we have been talking about government reforms and we've been talking about what GST and income tax can provide. In terms of growth, what's your full year outlook and can we reach that 6.5% mark?
So, Ishan, for this year, arriving at one number for the full year growth was a very difficult task because there's so much uncertainty for us economists also whether, tariff is going to come in what form. So, actually, we have built some scenarios. So, what we are saying is that if we assume that India is able to come up with some negotiation with US, and our tariff is reduced to around 19-20% level, as is the case with other competing Asian countries, then in that case we are expecting the impact on growth to be minimal. Then we are expecting GDP growth for the full year at 6.4% or so. Because we only export around 2% of our GDP to US, and in that too a large part of electronics sector, pharma sector is out of bounds of tariff as of now. So if we are able to come up with some kind of negotiation and tariff goes down to 18-20% level like other Asian countries, then we are expecting around 6.4%. However, if the tariff is higher at 25%, which was the case till a few weeks back, then that would be higher than our competing countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia. In that case, we are expecting the hit on growth to be higher. Then we are expecting growth around 6.2% or so. However, if the Trump tariff remains at these very high levels, 50%, then I said it's like, then that market is kind of shut for us. Then in that case, we fear that growth could slip below 6%. Then we are expecting around 5.8 to 6%. So basically, it has to be seen how this plays out over a little longer period of time. We feel that this 50% tariff most probably is going to go down. Some kind of negotiation will be worked out, but it's difficult to say when, and then in what form will we have tariff going forward. So, and like we've been discussing, the this whole uncertainty is also a big negative for the economy. So these are the different scenarios around which we have worked.
Anita, thanks for joining back. I think we were facing some issues with the connection. Uh, I hope Indian economy doesn't face the same this year. But moving to the part, Anita, what do you believe would be the impact of Trump's tariffs, and what does the government need to do in the next generation reforms? If I remember, Prime Minister Modi was from the ramparts of Red Fort announcing a task force on next generation reforms. So, what would be your wish list if you were to ask that?
So, in terms of next generation reforms, I think my first wish list would be like possibly a very, what do you say, a big wish list, one nation, one election that's been in the drive for a long time. Because what I would think is that that would free up a lot of government resources, government time, energy in terms toward focusing towards policy formulation rather than just focusing on elections. The second thing, a lot long pending land reforms in terms of digitalization of land records and land acquisition, that would be pretty dominant and one of the key reforms, because That's also been pending for a long time, and most of the infrastructure projects even today get stalled because of land acquisition issues. Again, labor reforms, even that is like pending for a long time. Lot of work needs to be done on center state coordination. Ease of doing business is still a hassle. So there is a lost wish list. And even, for example, the much awaited IT income tax reforms, the huge bill that got passed, but the actual nuances of the bill was not really like landmark while it was expected to be a landmark. So there are a lot of things that can be done in that space. The good thing is that the GST reforms that we saw right now is a big step in that direction. So, but the wish list is still very long. Yeah.
Paras, coming to you, you were talking about investment, and Anita just talked about the ease of doing business part of things. Would that be enough to push for private capex this year? It seems like government seems to be doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to capex in the first quarter itself. So can private investment come back, or are we going to see new lows in private investment because of the uncertainty that surrounds us?
So yeah, I mean, if you look at the first quarter number, then we expect the overall investment demand also not to be that great. It would be around at least 6.8%. That's what our expectation is, and broader heavy lifting would be done by the government, and especially we are seeing some slowdown also in household capex, where real estate sales have also like moderated. So that kind of push that was there for quite 2 3 years post COVID has also gone slow, started to taper off. So that is definitely there in terms of really boosting private capex on a long term basis. If I would say, then uh, one has to see that the we had a very great reform of IPC, where we have lost in terms of gotten lost in terms of the where our judiciary also is, that judicial reforms are something also which are a very key part in terms of handling the number of cases that are pending, and that helps in terms of dispute resolution, which also is a very great dampener for not only consumers but also for investors as well. And then apart from that, one big thing that we haven't really talked about is that since its independence, uh, one reform that hasn't been done is the administrative reforms, where like various sectors have witnessed some bit of reforms. Administration is something which still remains the kind of structure where it was during the independence time. And considering that India is heading wants to be a developed nation by 2047, then we need to do some path breaking things. And I think judicial and administrative reforms are something which are part of the deregulation also, which the this year, if you look at the economic survey, was also talking about that. So apart from factor market reforms, this would be, I think, one of the two things that I would say that would really help in terms of boosting investor sentiment, in terms of policy certainty, which if India is able to provide, that would be a really great factor to the investors as well, because currently uncertainty is becoming the certainty. But to have that certainty at this moment is really important, and India can provide that. That's definitely there. I mean, if we are able to do the take this as the second 1991 movement, I mean, definitely 7% and going beyond, having a sustained growth 8% also won't be that far.
Anita, let me come to you on that part. One, is the 6.5% growth rate achievable for this year? Also, can we go to 7% in coming years? S&P's outlook I was looking at, they have been projecting 7% going down to FY 28, if I'm not mistaken. So, is that possible, or is there much more hard work that needs to be done?
So it's possible, but as you said, there is a lot more hard work needs to be done, because if like the base case is like 6 to 6.5 seems to be like an easy way out given our domestically focused economy. But the fact that every probably crisis is possibly a challenge. So I would think that possibly India should make this crisis also a challenge, diversify its exports. The much spoken about PLI, which was launched in 2020, PLI schemes in more than 10 to 14 sectors. Besides the IT and hardware sector, you don't see PLI in most of the sectors. So it's possibly the time that start revigorating this PLI schemes for most of these sectors and look for new export destinations other than the US. And we are seeing a lot of political reconnections happening with respect to China, with respect to Russia, Europe, and maybe other regions like Middle East, Africa, and so on. So this is the time when government has to use the crisis as an opportunity. Global maps are getting redrawn. Global, political landscape is getting redrawn. The connections and the political, licensing is getting redrawn. So, and India is actually a strong point at this point. India is not the weak. India is not what it was in either 91 or in 2013 or even 2020. India is very strong at this point, which is why possibly the global leaders are also taking note of India's growth story. So I would think a lot more can be done, and government is possibly doing that. So even if we keep the step aside, take a step back, and look at this whole tariff issue as a noise, and keep it aside for 6-7 months, and hope that things will normalize in some time, and focus on rebuilding supply chains towards the countries that we have not focused so far. I think we can easily reach to a 7% plus growth, because domestic consumption story is still holding up pretty strong. Like, while most of the economists, we don't think that a below 6% growth, unless there is a big macro shock, is likely to happen, because India is still a very strong consumption oriented story. Rural economy is doing well, and government is doing its bit in terms of reviving urban consumption to a very strong level. So the only challenge is exports and the related impact, because that will impact jobs, that will impact your sentiment and all of those things, and obviously the domestic economy also gets impacted in the second order. But if you see, there are several positive in terms of what RBI is doing in terms of growth agenda of the government and so on. So I think 7% is achievable. But yeah, there, as you said, hard work needs to be done there, and it needs to be done faster, not at the pace that we have been doing so far. A really fast execution needs to happen.
Rajni, moving to you, you were talking about wage growth. Can we expect wage growth to actually bounce that number this year, given the uncertainties? Would private sector actually prefer paying more? Also, on Anita's part, she was talking about the other part of the number also. Is there a chance we may slip below 6% if these tariffs don't normalize?
So, talking about wage growth, like I said, for urban areas, if we see what is happening in IT sector will play a very critical role in overall what's happening to wage growth. And there, given the, while our services exports are doing well so far, even with whatever is happening on the tariff front and the whole global uncertainty, but there is no denying that overall global demand has got impacted. So if the IT sector, does not perform very well, if there is a moderation in revenue there, which we are also seeing in terms of, the corporate quarterly results that we have seen, we are seeing some moderation in revenue. And if that's the case, then there will be pressure on them to reduce employee cost. So in that sense, I don't see that scenario improving. And in fact, keep in mind that, if this tariff situation plays out as US is threatening with 50% tariff, then a lot of very labor intensive sectors like textile, leather, gems and jewelry, these are very, very labor intensive sectors. And these would get severely impacted. So, then this would have second round effect of, having an impact on consumption, because a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So I don't see the situation in terms of, wage growth improving this year, because the situation looks very uncertain. What is happening in the organized as well as unorganized sector? Talking about, is there a possibility of growth slipping below 6%? I wouldn't completely rule that out if we are not able to, come up with a negotiation with US. And as you can see, India is also being very careful. There are some sectors, which the government has been highlighting, agriculture, dairy, where we are not ready to, open up. We are, that those sectors are just not ready to kind of, compete with the global markets, and we are not ready to compromise on opening up of those sectors. So if India sticks to its ground, then probably it will be difficult to come out with a, negotiation with US. And in case this 50% tariff stays, then definitely growth can take a big hit, and then it is possible that growth could go below 6%.
Anita, coming to you on this aspect, one, if the growth does go below 6%, or if the situation so arises, how much room do you have, or do you think RBI has to manipulate policy in its favor?
Growth shocks come from an external environment, then RBI has very limited space actually here to boost in terms of growth. Because how much ever policy cuts they do, if the shock is like what Rajni said, you don't have a job from the textile sector or the labor intensive sectors. Whichever rate cut happens, then you still cannot boost the demand in terms of at least buying say durable goods or semi durable goods, like washing machines and fans or fridge and so on. So I think more so RBI space there will be limited, but of course they will try hard and do other things in terms of like what happened during the pandemic in terms of giving leeway, say for certain sectors, especially MSME sectors and so on, in terms of credit intervention. That's what RBI can do more than actually doing a broad-based rate cut. But I think here, if push comes to shove, I think here government may also step in, give some incentives to sectors, make sure that there is no severe job losses happening, and try and see how much you can diversify. For example, there is a statement from Russia also which said that we'll be happy to buy Indian goods. So these are more high level political negotiations rather than anything else. So it's be more like friend shoring, re-friend shoring, or whatever you call it. So that way, I think government will step in real hard, and make sure that we don't see such kind of hard losses, because at the end of the day that will impact not just the growth, you will see the impact on the fiscal side as well, right? Then the fiscal deficit ratios, borrowing numbers, all these things will take a hit. And we just had a rating update from S&P today, which has given a stable rating and an outlook, say, but still quoting that fiscal reasons are the predominant reasons as to why India is not getting a further rating upgrade. So at all these junctures, it's not just about RBI. I think government will also do its bit. We already have notice around announcement of at least 25,000 crores. So those are the things I think which will have some cushioning effect. And mind you, all this again, I think will be like temporary. We're not going to see such shocks for an extended period of time, because even in the US, they would understand that while India is still just about 3% of their overall import pie, but still there could be critical components like, say, for example, pharma or certain specific auto components in which they would be dependent on India as well, and plus the huge amount of services sectors which the US economy depends on India again. So there are negotiating tools, and there could be only shocks will be possibly more for a shorter term. Is what we would see.
Paras, coming to you on the shocks part, if I take the GST cuts, how long can that effect last? And if I take the tariffs, how much time does it take usually to diversify? I think that's something that everybody wants to know. It's not like tomorrow you start sending products to Russia or China or somewhere else. That cannot happen, of course.
Definitely, that answers in part of it. It is very difficult to diversify in a short period of time, and uh, we have seen that also Apple has had its way in terms of exporting and keeping electronics out of it. So, because they have kind of built the kind of ecosystem in India, especially in Tamil Nadu, and something is all we are seeing that some things are also like getting manufacturing bases getting started to build up in different segments as well. Whether one looks at chips in Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. So it is very difficult. And so, as to say, in terms of the longer impact of GST cuts, it depends. I mean, actually, how it is implemented as well, and in what ways. If it happens, then we would definitely get a longer impact of the boost from the consumption demand from the cuts, but uncertainty, as I said earlier as well, this would be having a very, very big impact, because that impacts investment decisions, and investment decisions have a further impact in terms of how you do hiring and wage growths happening in different sectors, and that in turn has an impact on overall consumption. So net net, it would be something that the more demand side factors need to be corrected, and there, I mean, those key reforms need to be undertaken for India to get out from this 6 to 6.5% growth. I mean, to have 7.5 to 8%. That's what I think we need to see for.
Paras has given me the last question and a quick one I would ask all of you, starting with Paras only because he only proposed this idea. Is 8% achievable? Given that we are targeting the 2047 goal, is 8% under the current scenarios achievable? And how much time would it take to reach that mark?
So that, I mean, depends on a lot of factors, and if the GST reforms are starting point for a lot of things that to come, then definitely 7.5 looks good, but I think 8% would be a bit too difficult at this current juncture of uncertainty that is there. And we have seen that post COVID, there is a lot of shocks happening. First, we had COVID, then the war, and again, geopolitical war erupted in the Middle East, and we have seen that playing out again. And this year, I mean, has been nothing short of nothing but unprecedented nature. So. And this is compared, I mean, if you compare with the earlier decade, then it is certainly a very decade of a lot of shocks. So I would say that 7.5 to 8 definitely looks difficult, but 7% plus can be achievable if we fast track on the reforms in a greater way, and we do something quick enough and do some big bang reforms. So, yeah.
Rajni, over to you. Is 8% achievable? And if yes, under what scenario?
Ishan, it looks difficult at this point in time, 8%. And the question is actually not just achieving 8% in 1 year. It's about, if we want to become Viksit Bharat by 2047, we need 8% on a sustainable basis. And that, I would say, looks very challenging at this point in time. There's a lot of positive development that has happened in the economy in terms of infrastructure development and reforms, reduction of regulations, improvement in ease of doing business. But whatever has happened so far is not enough for us to achieve 8% growth on a sustainable basis. We need more on that front.
Anita, lastly to you, is 8% achievable? And many people would say if China could do it, why can't we? But have scenarios and the conditions materially changed with globalization slowing a bit?
Definitely. I mean, see, China's political regime is very, very different in comparison to India. So, if 8% needs to be achieved, the first thing we need to look at is center-state coordination. So, the moment centers, announces a policy, all the state governments have to follow. That's how the China model is. So, if and China model is a lot where government gives a lot of jobs for so many sectors. Even as we speak, they've eased something on the real estate side and so on. So, it's China model is clearly not comparable because we don't have a similar political and system. But at the same time, when you say 8% is a wish list that is achievable, but whether the practicality of that is achievable is very, very challenging, I would say. One of the market leaders actually spoke about ROTI, return on time invested. So, in India, execution is the biggest challenge. It's not even about a GST reform. It's about the implementation and the execution, the pace of execution of every reform, every policy is what is the biggest challenge. So that needs to be really fast tracked. Even a simple math around, roads and highways. How many times have we spoken about the number of kilometers per day, a target versus actual, a simple divestment target versus actual? There are so many things which come up in the budget in terms of big targets and wish lists, but the actual always falls short because of execution issues. So I think it's more about execution, execution, and execution. If we want to make, if we want to create a wish list towards an 8%, but let's look at baby steps first. We resolve all these tariff issues, go towards a 7%, then 7.5%, and then to 8 is what I would say.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on the show, Anita. Even though there were some issues, it's good that we resolved them. It was good to have you. Thanks, Rajni, as always, for coming on the show, and thanks, Paras, for being on the show again. It was great to have you. For our viewers, it's a sweet and sour year, as Paras pointed out. There have never been so much unprecedented uncertainties that have come up. For Rajni, as she pointed out, wage growth scenario may not improve this year, which is a concern for India. The GST and everything can work one way, but if the wage growth doesn't improve, there's a problem there. Paras pointed out that uncertainty leads to a problem on the private investment side, which could have troubles for India going forward. And as Anita said, the practicality of 8% becomes a challenge. Although there is a wish list, we need to take baby steps first. And RBI can only go so much in supporting growth. There has to be other avenues as well. The government needs to move fast on reforms, and by fast, she means a faster pace. Let's see what the task force does and what it brings, and in what form, shape the GST is implemented. Thanks for coming on the show, and thank you for our viewers. We would love to have all of you again for our show. Thank you.
Thank you. Our
Thank
pleasure.
you.